What's up guys, my name is Fran and once again welcome back. And this video is going to be episode number 1 of something I like to call the struggle. So this video as well as future episodes of The Struggle are pretty much going to be technical how-to video guides for different technological tasks that I struggled with and couldn't really find a proper YouTube video guide for them. And in this very first episode we'll be tackling the Hackintosh, more specifically the X99 Hackintosh. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So what is a Hackintosh exactly? Well, it's pretty much just like any other DIY build-it-yourself PC. It's going to have a motherboard, a processor, RAM, a hard drive, but instead of you paying Apple a ton of money to run their operating system on this hardware, we're going to just be installing their operating system on one of these build-it-yourself PCs. So while I'm about to go over the specs of this beautifully built machine right to the left of me, I do want to mention the fact that there is only one component that's super critical when it comes to building yourself a Hackintosh, and that's going to be the motherboard. Notoriously, Hackintoshes pretty much only will run on an Asus or Gigabyte motherboard. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to install on another brand, but it seems that most people have the best success when it comes to using these two brands, so my recommendation is for you to stick to one of these two. Now, in my particular video, we'll actually be using an Asus Strix motherboard, but let's just go over the specs of the system. Now, as far as the specifications for this system, like I just mentioned, the motherboard is an Asus Strix X99 ROG. And when it comes to the processor, we'll be using an Intel 6850 6-core 12-thread processor. When it comes to the memory, we'll be using 16 gigabytes of Corsair's Vengeance LPX. The graphics card is going to be an EVGA 1080 Ti. And when it comes to the hard drive, while you might see an NVMe SSD, the 950 Pro, we'll actually be using this basic Samsung 850 EVO. Oh, and just one more thing before we begin. I do want to mention as a disclaimer, a Hackintosh is not exactly sanctioned by Apple. In fact, it might even violate their EULA. The system can be very unstable and it can be broken with a simple driver installation or even a system update. So this isn't exactly something I would recommend to anyone who's really looking for a main operating system, but rather something to have a little fun with, maybe get your feet wet when it comes to macOS, or if you're just trying to get prepared and you want to hold off before you pick up the iMac Pro. But once again, I would definitely not recommend this to anyone who's looking for a main operating system for their computer. Okay, so before we begin, you're gonna need two things. Number one, you're gonna need access to a real Macintosh computer. Now, it doesn't have to be a personal one, it could be a borrowed one from a friend or maybe school, but you do need access to a real Macintosh computer. And then you're gonna also need one of these guys, a flash drive. Okay, so step number one is actually going to be preparing that USB flash drive using that Macintosh computer that I said were both requirements for this entire Macintosh build guide. Now, once you are logged into your Macintosh computer, you are going to open up the Apple App Store. Once you launch this, you're going to go ahead and download the latest version of macOS. In particular, at the time of recording this video, I am going to be downloading macOS Sierra version 10.12.6. Okay, so now that we've downloaded our copy of macOS, we now need to prepare the USB flash drive. Now, to do so, we're going to go ahead and go to our Finder and I'll click on Go at the top and then hit the Utilities folder. Now, once we're in here, we're going to launch the application Disk Utility. Once we have Disk Utility launched, we want to navigate to that actual USB flash drive. In my case, it's a Lexar USB flash drive media, but in your case, it might be something different. And we're going to go ahead and erase it. Now, you want to name the flash drive USB, and that's because the next step, which is going to be a command, is expecting the flash drive to be named USB. If you decide to name it something else, just remember the next line, you're going to need to modify that in the command line entry. So we're going to go ahead and make sure it's named USB. Then we're going to go ahead and make sure it's also formatted from macOS Extended Journals. And then the scheme is going to be GUID. Going to hit erase. Okay, so now that this is complete, we can go ahead and close Disk Utility, and in that very same folder we're going to launch the application Terminal. Then what we're going to do is we're going to grab this command here. Now again, this command is basically saying it's looking for a macOS Sierra inside of the applications folder, and then it's looking for a flash drive called USB. So if any of these parameters are any different, please make sure to correct it or else this command will not work. But we're going to go ahead and copy it, and then we're going to paste it here in our command line, and then we're going to hit the enter button and we're going to type in our password, and then once again we're going to play the waiting game. Okay, and now that that's done, you can see it took some time, but it did finally finish, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so as far as the next step goes, you're going to need to download a number of applications as well as different KEX files and just a bunch of really weird and quirky things. I'm going to do you guys a favor and put everything into a single package in a zip file and leave a link to maybe a Dropbox link or a Google Drive download. Hopefully at the time of recording this video, or at the time you're watching this video, that link still works. If it doesn't, I'll leave an actual link to the actual guide that I followed for you guys to go ahead and download that stuff yourself. Maybe you want more updated kexts than the ones I might have in the zip. But just know that it can get a little bit tedious bouncing around downloading all of these files. So like I said, for the sake of this video, I'm going to teach you guys how to just go ahead and copy the files that I'm going to put in a zip file and just drop them in your EFI folder. Now, speaking of EFI, the next step we're actually going to do is downloading an application or navigating to that folder and launching an application called Clover. Now, once you go ahead and launch the Clover application, it's going to ask you to go ahead and install itself onto a volume. When you get to this point, you're going to want to stop and then change your installation location, and then go ahead, instead of selecting your hard drive, you're going to select your USB media. We're going to then go ahead and hit continue, but instead of moving on once again, we're going to customize it, and then we're going to go ahead and click some of these certain options. Okay, so first off, you're going to want to select install for UEFI booting only, and then you want to go ahead and install Clover in the ESP. So we already got that selected. Then you're going to select the bootloader theme that you want. Honestly, these themes really don't matter. I know this one's kind of ugly, so I'm just going to go and pick, I'm going to go with random actually. It doesn't really matter. They're all pretty terrible. Actually, no, I'll go with metal. Okay, and then finally, under the only, select the EMU verifiable, which is going to be a little bit down here under drivers. You're going to want to hit this one here, and that's about it. So once you go ahead and select all of these things, you're going to hit the install button, and then it's going to ask you for your password one more time, and then you are good to go. Okay, so now that you might possibly have that zip file downloaded and extracted into a convenient location, what you're going to want to do is just go ahead and navigate to your Finder and look for an ejectable volume labeled EFI. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and grab the Clover folder out of that particular zip file or zip folder that I went ahead and set for you guys for download, and you're going to want to paste it into your local. Now you're going to want to replace it, not into your local, into that EFI ejectable volume. Now, I'm going to go ahead and replace this because this has a bunch of the settings and different things like that I have. Now, I'm sure a number of people aren't going to recommend this because Clover can be a little bit finicky. However, in particular, if you don't want to just copy the Clover folder, at least copy the kex 10.12 folder. This has a lot of the files, as well as in the drivers folder, the drivers 64 UEFI. This has a number of the drivers that I went ahead and put in place that you're going to need for this particular installation. So once you're done with that, you're pretty much set up when it comes to the USB drive. You can go ahead and eject it, and then go ahead, we'll move on now to step number 2, onto the actual PC itself. Okay, so now that we have our USB flash drive ready to go, we still need to do one more thing before we can go ahead and install the operating system. We need to make a couple of minor tweaks to the BIOS on your computer. Now, once again, like I said, this is X99 Strix, so these are going to be the instructions for an Asus motherboard. First things first, you want to go ahead, once you're here in this menu, you want to make sure you're in the advanced menu. Then you want to navigate all the way to the right where it says exit, and then you want to load optimized defaults. This sort of just gives us a level playing field and brings everything back to factory standards. That way, when we make any tweaks, we don't have any issues or any special BIOS configurations there that might cause things to go a little bit haywire. Okay, so first things first, in the BIOS, what we want to do is navigate over to our AI tweaker. Then we want to go down to our Asus multi-core enhancement. Here we want to just go ahead and disable that. Then we want to make sure our CPU core ratio is set to auto, and our internal PLL voltage is once again disabled. Next, you want to go over to the advanced configuration here, and then you want to go into your CPU configuration. You want to go ahead and find the Intel speed step technology. Sorry, what I meant to say is you need to also go into the CPU power management configuration. Here you'll find the enhanced speed step technology. You want to go ahead and disable that, and then you want to go down to turbo mode, make sure that is enabled, and then you want to make sure CPU C states are enabled. Then we're going to go ahead and go back. Next, we want to go back one more time up to the advanced CPU configuration, then find your way down to the USB configuration. Here you want to find the Intel XHCI mode, and you want to go ahead and confirm it's either on Smart Auto or enabled. I'm just going to leave that alone. And then we also want to make sure that our eHCI support is enabled. We got that, and then we also need to have our XHCI enabled, which we've got that. And pretty much all these are going to be, just confirming that they are set the way they are, which is a good thing. Go all the way down to our serial port configuration. We want to turn that off. Next, we want to navigate over to our boot, and we want to disable fast boot. Then we want to go to our setup mode and just switch this to advanced. This is more of a preference, not an actual requirement, but it makes a lot of sense to make sure you're in the advanced menu when you go into your BIOS. Next, you want to go into your CSM setup, and we want to go ahead and under launch CSM, we're going to switch this to disabled. Then next, we're going to go down to secure boot, and we're going to switch this over to other OS. And then other than that, we are pretty much done. Now we can hit the F10 key on our keyboard, and then we can go ahead and hit OK, and our computer will now restart. At this point, what we can do is we can actually insert our USB flash drive. Okay, so now that we have our USB flash drive inserted into our computer, we should now come to this menu. This is going to be our Clover boot manager. From here, we can go ahead and just simply hit the enter on the keyboard. Okay, so it does take some time and patience, but eventually your computer will load to this screen here, and this is going to be your standard macOS installation screen. So first things first, we want to go ahead and go to our disk utility, and then we want to, once it loads, we're going to look for the drive that we want to install on. In my case, it's the Samsung SSD 850 EVO. So I'm going to select this drive. I'm going to hit the erase button here, and I'm going to make sure that it's set to my parameters. So I'm going to name it Mac HD. Okay, and then I'm going to make sure it's formatted for Mac OS Extended Journaled, and then our partition scheme is going to be GUID. So I'm going to go ahead and hit erase. Great, and we are formatted. So now I can close this out and then go now to this install macOS icon here. And then at this point, it's like watching paint dry. So we're going to go ahead and let it install. It might take some time, but we're going to come back to the video once we've got macOS installed on this hard drive. Okay, so once we finish the installation, this is where we should be, inside of the macOS operating system, of course, after we've run through the setup assistant. So what I've gone ahead and done is grab that same exact folder that I mentioned I'd have for download, and I've copied it local to this computer because we're going to need a couple of files out of that folder. So what we need to do is go into our X99 Hackintosh folder, and we're going to go to applications, and we are going to once again run Clover version 2.4. It doesn't really matter the version, but we're going to run the Clover application. We're going to run through the actual installation, and we're going to stop one more time. Of course, this time we actually are going to be installing this on the local hard drive. And then we're going to go to customize, and we're going to once again click install for UEFI, install Clover on the ESP. We're going to go ahead and once again choose a theme. I'm going to pick metal, and then we're also going to install only the variable UEFI driver. Then we're going to add one more option to this, and we are going to install RC scripts on target value. Once we're done with this, we're going to hit install, just type in our password. Okay, and great. So now that we are complete with this, we're going to go ahead and shut down the computer, remove the USB drive, and next time we boot up, we're going to be booting up directly off of the hard drive itself. Okay, so now that we're back in the operating system, we pretty much just have one more step to do. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back into that X99 Hackintosh folder. We are going to go ahead and you run the application called EFI Mounter. It's going to Okay, great. So now what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and mount our EFI volume. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go here into this same folder, and then we're going to go ahead and go into our Clover folder, and we're going to grab, and this is going to be the Clover folder from the X99 Hackintosh folder, but we're going to go ahead and replace our kex. We're also going to replace our drivers. We are going to replace our config.plist. So once we do that, the last step we actually need to take is to go into our files and run the WebDriver. At the time of recording this video, this is the latest WebDriver for NVIDIA, and that's going to be because we're using an NVIDIA card. The process for AMD is a little bit different. Unfortunately, I don't actually have an AMD card to actually show you guys, but it's just slightly different, and I'll leave a link in the video description of how you can install the drivers for that. But yes, once you're done installing the NVIDIA driver, you are pretty much done with your Hackintosh for the most part. There's a number of other tweaks and different kecks and different things like that you can do to make it a little more stable, make it a little bit faster. But for the most part, this is just going to give you the foundation as to what you need to get up and running macOS on regular PC hardware. Okay, so hopefully I made that easy enough for you guys to follow. But of course, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Also, while you're down there, if you like this video and you want to see more like it, slam on the like button. And if you aren't already subscribed to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. I'm so close to 2,000 at the time of recording this video. And when I do actually hit that number, I've got a little secret and a special surprise for you guys. But once again, guys, my name is Fran. Thanks so much for checking out this video, and I will see you guys in my next one.